Good evening, everyone. I'm just waiting for a few more people to join, and feel free to turn off your camera if you'd like to. You don't have to have your camera on. And just to say welcome this evening. It's lovely to have you here. So for those of you that don't know who I am, before I kind of progress into the webinar this evening, I'm Sue Thomas. I'm the sugar-free coach, and I empower people to break their addiction to sugar. As I'm talking to you, I'm just letting a few more people in. So tonight we're going to look at the truth about sugar. We're going to understand a little bit more about how sugar impacts us. But before we do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about my background and how I got to where I am as far as being the sugar-free coach is concerned. So I've been in the wellness industry for about 20 years, and about 15 years ago I had a streptococcal knee infection, which basically resulted in me being on antibiotics for about 25 days, high dose antibiotics for about 25 days. And if you fast forward from that point to 4 years later, I was really struggling. I was working as a personal trainer at the time, so I was working with clients, and I was having to take a sleep in the afternoon because I was exhausted all the time. I was eating rubbish food. I was eating a lot of bread. I was eating a lot of chocolate because I was eating foods just to give me what I thought would give me energy. And excuse me, I really wasn't walking the talk as far as my clients were concerned. And so I decided I needed to do something about it. I needed to take back control of my health. I could see that my health wasn't going to improve, and I couldn't carry on in my business if I didn't start to really look at my nutrition. Now, I've always had an interest in nutrition, but I decided that I was going to really focus in and design a program that was really easy for me to follow. Because I was busy, I had 3 children, they were quite young at the time, I had a busy personal training practice, and I just didn't have the time to make complicated meals and to do things that were kind of, you know, needed me to spend hours in the kitchen. And so as a result, the first step I took was to remove sugar from my diet. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not an angel. I'm not 100% sugar-free. I talk about being 90% sugar-free. So I do enjoy the occasional birthday cake, and I do have the odd dessert when we go out to eat and that kind of thing. So I do have that flexibility within my kind of eating regime. And as a result of creating that program for myself and healing my own health, I then retrained as a nutritional therapist. I'm a nutritional therapist now, and I moved away from personal training and just focused on the nutrition side of things and helping clients to really understand how sugar is impacting our health on a daily basis. So this evening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the truth about sugar. I'm just going to share my screen with you, and we're going to discover a little bit more about how sugar makes us feel. So sugar is, we actually consume a huge amount more sugar now than we ever have done in 21st century life, because sugar is hidden in so many places. And we are told things are healthy, we think things are healthy, but in reality, they don't actually provide us with the health that the food companies and the marketing companies like to make us believe they do. So a really good example is when I was personal training, when I was really struggling with my health, when I was having those really deep periods of fatigue in the afternoon, I was using cereal bars to keep me going because I believed they were healthy. I believed they were the thing that was going to give me some consistent energy, but it was going to be quite slow release energy, and I wasn't going to need to worry about taking on board too much sugar. Sugar is hidden everywhere, and we don't realize it. And even the things that we're told are low sugar, but high in protein, if you scrape below the surface, they are full of sweeteners. And sweeteners have exactly the same hormonal response internally as sugar does. And we're going to explore that in a little bit more detail now as we move through this presentation. So let's start with the perpetual cycle of sugar addiction. Let's start there, because there's 2 kind of things that are happening here. The first is when we eat sugar, we have a small dopamine release into the brain, and we feel good when we eat sugar because it tastes nice. And so as a result, we kind of start to make an association with sugar making us feel better, which is why when we're stressed or when we're having difficult periods of time, we often reach for sugar. We comfort eat, as it's been called, we comfort eat on sugar because it gives us that little dopamine release. It makes us feel a little bit better. But more important than the dopamine is the relationship that sugar has with insulin. Now, insulin is a really dominant hormone. It's a really important hormone to understand, but it has a really important role to play in the body. Now, insulin is released from the pancreas. The pancreas is just behind the liver on the right-hand side, and it is the organ that is designed to release insulin. And insulin is the hormone that allows us to keep our blood sugars balanced. It's designed to keep us alive, insulin is, because what it does is it's released into the bloodstream when we consume some sugar, or when we consume some carbohydrate, I should say. And it's designed to pick up that carbohydrate, that glucose that comes from the carbohydrate, and take it to the cells for energy production. Now, if the glucose that we're consuming comes from more colorful carbohydrates, which I'm going to share with you in a minute, that is a much slower release of sugars into the bloodstream, and so insulin is released really slowly. But if we're consuming our glucose from sugar in the form of cakes and biscuits and bread, for example, that's processed really quickly in the system. And so insulin is released very quickly from the pancreas. It's released to pick up the sugars, to take them to the cells for energy production. However, if we're more sedentary and we're not burning any energy, the cells, the receptors, the insulin receptors on the cells start to shut down. And they basically cells basically say, don't want any more sugar. The mitochondria is not going to burn that sugar, take it away. And because the insulin has been released into the system really quickly, because the sugar is refined, so it's easy to access by the body, as quickly as the insulin is released and the cells say they don't want that sugar, just as quickly the insulin it removes itself from the bloodstream and takes those sugars to the liver, because the body can't use it for energy. It takes it to the liver, converts it to triglycerides, and stores that sugar as fat. And so we have these high insulin spikes when we're consuming some refined sugar, and then just as quickly an insulin drop, a blood sugar fall, and we kind of head into this low blood sugar. And because our brain functions on glucose, the brain immediately kicks in and says, I'm perceiving that blood sugars are low, eat something quickly to bring your blood glucose levels back up again. And as a result, we reach for something sweet to bring our blood glucose levels back up again. We have another spike in blood sugar, and the same pattern happens again. We don't need the sugar for energy, so the insulin quickly drops out of the system, takes the sugars to the liver and converts it to triglycerides and stores it for fat. We have these peaks and troughs of hunger and cravings, followed by high blood sugars and a bit of kind of maybe hyperactivity, and then a trough again and a peak and a trough. So often what happens is our blood sugars are controlling our cravings, and it may be that we don't even realize that we're eating as much sugar as we are, because our blood sugars are on this constant roller coaster. And so getting your blood sugars under control can be a really difficult process to go through if you don't know how to do it. And unfortunately, the diet industry in particular do not focus on insulin balance. They focus much more on calories and fat loss. And actually, it's a much easier way to manage your weight. It's a much easier way to it's much easier way to manage your weight. It's a much easier way to manage your hormones. It's a much easier way to get better sleep if your blood sugars are really nicely balanced and insulin is under control. So let's take a look at that carbohydrate spectrum, that glucose spectrum. Where are we getting our energy source from? So I like to call this the glucose spectrum, because basically on one end of the spectrum, you've got reds and greens and orange carbohydrates, and they are in the form of cruciferous vegetables, and you know, you went from broccoli to peppers to sweet potato, for example, or squash, and some fruits, reds, greens, and oranges, and then beige and white. And the beige and white, you're looking at bread and refined sugar in the form of cakes and biscuits, donuts, all those kind of things. Now, if we're getting our glucose from the carbohydrates that are colourful, those carbohydrates contain something called antioxidants. Now, any metabolic process that the body goes through releases substances called free radicals. They're quite harmful to the body, and we need to be able to neutralize them and clear them out of the system. They're volatile molecules. They need to have an electron donated to them in order for them to be stabilized. Now, antioxidants that come in the form of greens and reds and oranges have lots of antioxidants. So when we metabolize the glucose from those colorful fruits and veg, they're releasing the antioxidants that will neutralize the free radicals and clear those free radicals out of your system. However, so if we are consuming then our carbohydrates from beiges and whites, beige being the complex carbohydrates that we've been told for years are the way to kind of keep our blood sugars really balanced, and they're absolutely not. Those carbohydrates, the beige and the white carbohydrates, do not have any antioxidants in them, and so as a result, they those free radicals that are released when we release the glucose from those beige and white carbohydrates, those free radicals start to do damage in the system. So because they need this electron to stabilize themselves, they will steal electrons from healthy tissue. So that starts to set up some inflammation in the body, because they're stealing the electrons from the healthy tissue. So first signs of kind of inflammation in the system might be a bit of joint pain, some knuckle pain, maybe some wrist pain, maybe some knee pain. Also increased lines around your eyes, and maybe some age spots on the back of your hands. Those are all signs that there's a bit of inflammation going on in your body, probably caused by more refined glucose, more refined sugar that you've been consuming. Because that inflammation, or those free radicals that are causing the inflammation, are not being neutralized and cleared out of the system. Now, this inflammation that's being formed by this refined sugar is a stress internally. It starts to cause more inflammation because of the further hormones that are then released as a result of consuming or having these blood sugar peaks and troughs and consuming too much sugar from the refined form. Now, this stress internally, this inflammation that's caused internally, leads to the release of a hormone called cortisol. Now, cortisol is a really important hormone for healing the body. It should rise through the course of the morning. Its peaks around mid to late morning, and then it begins to gradually drop off through the afternoon. It gives us energy, it helps the body heal. It's a really important hormone. However, when we've got internal stress going on in the form of inflammation caused by eating too much refined sugar, this internal inflammation starts to cause the constant release of cortisol. And when cortisol rises too high in the system, it becomes really toxic to the body. It starts to cause all sorts of disruptions, which we're going to explore in a little bit more detail in a minute. So basically, your glucose spectrum is these reds, these greens, and these oranges, these carbohydrates with lots of antioxidants that release sugars into your bloodstream really nice and slowly, keep your blood sugars really well balanced, and have antioxidants to reduce the free radical damage. And then you've got beiges and whites, those glucose forms that don't have the antioxidants, that release quite quickly into your bloodstream and will start to cause inflammation in the body. So when we're consuming more foods on the beige end of the spectrum, this is when we start to see the blood sugar imbalances. Now, when I was a personal trainer and I first started to get to grips with my nutrition, I couldn't understand how am I going to have enough energy if I don't have bread in my lunch, because that's surely the complex carbohydrate that gives me the energy that I need for the afternoon. What I didn't realize was that bread was actually causing not only bloating, but was causing that 4 p.m. slump that I was struggling with, that I was having to go to have a sleep. I thought that some of this was linked to the fact that I was just a really busy personal trainer. I didn't make the association with the types of foods that I was eating and how it was making me feel. So that 4 p.m. slump was definitely caused by the food that I was eating at lunchtime. As soon as I removed the beige carbohydrate and started to focus more on the colorful carbohydrates and lots of protein, and I began to balance my blood sugars better, I got rid of that afternoon slump completely. My energy levels rocketed. Now, I believed before I started to look into nutrition that actually those complex carbohydrates we've been told are the things that we need to eat for years, they were actually causing me to have these peaks and troughs of blood sugar imbalance. And so, again, what I was eating for breakfast, I believed it was a healthy breakfast. I was having at this stage toast, wholemeal toast with peanut butter on it, because I believed that was a good, healthy breakfast. That was a slow release carbohydrate that was going to keep me going all through the morning. But actually, that toast that I was having for my breakfast was causing the initial spike in my blood sugars. So that red line that you can see there that's going up and down, it was causing the initial spike in my blood sugars, which then in return was causing my blood sugars to crash because it was a too quick release of sugars and glucose into my bloodstream. Insulin was being released very quickly, and then insulin was removing the sugars equally as quickly, and I was having this blood sugar crash. So by 10:30, I was hungry. Often I was struggling with my productivity. I couldn't focus properly. I didn't have a huge amount of energy. I was a bit distracted at 10:30. I just wasn't functioning effectively. And I would then end up having a cup of coffee and something, again, maybe a slightly sweeter oat biscuit that I thought was healthy, because I believed that was what I'd been told by the media. That was a good thing to have. And I'd have that mid-morning. And then I'd have another spike in blood sugars and another crash. So by lunchtime, I was super hungry and I was reaching for anything I could find in the kitchen to lift my blood sugars back up whilst I was making my sandwich. So I was kind of mindlessly eating as well. My blood sugars would spike again at about 3 o'clock and they'd crash. And so this cycle was continuing throughout the course of the day. And I knew when I was getting to that point where I wasn't walking the talk, I needed to do something about this. I needed to make a change. And to begin with, I didn't know where to start. So I took the first really simple steps of beginning to try and remove those sugary foods out of my diet, that cereal bar in the afternoon and that sweet oat biscuit that I was having in the morning. Because once I scratched beneath the surface, I could see that they were all full of sugar. And they were actually fueling my tiredness, my sleepiness that is in the afternoon, my inability to recover from exercise as quickly as I would have liked to, etc., etc. And this was all because my blood sugars were on a roller coaster and I didn't realize. Now, another thing you should know about insulin is that insulin, being a dominant hormone, causes the release of a hormone called ghrelin. And ghrelin is a hormone that tells us we are hungry. So if insulin is high in the system, ghrelin will be released and we will find ourselves eating more than we might normally do. If insulin is balanced and low in the system and just a really steady curve, we release a hormone called leptin. And leptin is a hormone that tells us we're full. We don't release ghrelin, we release leptin, we stay fuller for longer when our blood sugars are really nicely balanced. So even though we are, we might be trying to move away from counting calories, for example, we actually end up eating less. And it's so empowering when you don't have to be thinking about how many calories you're consuming, and you're just focusing on foods that nourish your body. And it moves away from that place of lack that we can't have something when we're counting calories in order to manage our weight. And we move into a place of just not even thinking about what we're going to snack on or what have you, because we don't need to. We can go from one meal to the next without needing to eat anything, without needing to snack on anything between meals. That is what happens when your blood sugars are really nicely balanced. Leptin is high, insulin and ghrelin are low, and as a result, we're just not even thinking about food, and it frees us from this kind of treadmill of constantly focusing on the foods that we're eating and the amount of calories that we're having, etc., etc. Now, cast your mind back just a few minutes ago to when I was talking about cortisol, because cortisol, this hormone that actually is really important if it's at the right balance, when it builds up in the system, becomes really detrimental to the body. So we've got this inflammation that's happening because of the amount of refined sugar that we're consuming, the damage that's being done by these free radicals. Cortisol is rising in the system because it's trying to heal the body, because it's a hormone that's really important for healing. But when it rises too high in the system, one of the things that cortisol does is disrupt the health of our gut bacteria. So we have in our stomach, we'll have bacteria that lives on us and in us, it's in our mouth, but predominantly it's in our intestine. And this gut bacteria creates a wall around our intestinal wall. It protects the intestinal wall from anything passing across that shouldn't be passing across. We should have about 85% good bacteria, 15% bad bacteria. Now, one of the reasons why we struggle with IBS and when we're stressed or when we're consuming lots of sugar is because cortisol rises in the system and disrupts the health of the good bacteria. And that good bacteria then starts to, the wall, this impenetrable barrier that is created on the wall of the intestine, starts to get holes in it, because the cortisol starts to break down the health of this good bacteria. And these holes begin to form. And so the food substances, the food substances we're eating, pathogens, any particles that basically shouldn't really be in our intestine, large undigested food particles, they get through these holes in the wall of the microbiome, of the gut bacteria, and they start to break down the junctions between the endothelial cells that line the wall of the intestine. So these endothelial cells have really tight junctions. They don't allow anything to pass across and are protected by the gut bacteria. But if the gut bacteria is breaking down, so these junctions start to be exposed, and things can begin to work away at these junctions and pass through them and begin to get their way through the gut wall. And this is what's known as leaky gut. Now, what happens then is the immune system begins to respond. Now, we talked about inflammation before being set up by the free radical damage, but there's also another form of inflammation that is designed to protect all our external barriers to the outside world. So if you take your skin, for example, if you cut your skin, you have a small amount of inflammation that forms around that cut, because the inflammation is protecting the body from anything passing across that cut. It's a form of kind of sealing off the breaches in our defenses in a way. And this is exactly the same happens around the gut wall. When things start to pass through those endothelial junctions and pass across the gut wall, the immune system then goes, right, we need to create more inflammation to block up these holes that are developing in the gut wall. But as one hole is blocked up by the inflammation, so another hole forms, and another hole forms, and another hole forms. And this form of inflammation is called systemic inflammation. It's deep down inflammation around the organs that starts to cause all sorts of other issues. It can begin to lead to autoimmune conditions because of the immune system being in overdrive. It can begin to lead to high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes. It can begin to really influence menopause symptoms and hormone balance. It can then also have an impact on our cortisol even further, which influences our sleep. Cortisol and insulin together are like the ugly sisters of hormones. They prevent any fat burning from taking place. So if you've been on some kind of calorie restricted diet and you never seem to be able to lose weight, that will be because cortisol and insulin are high in the system, and they prevent any fat burning from taking place. At best, it's a bit of IBS and some bloating. At worst, it's an autoimmune condition that can be debilitating and lead you to not be able to live a full and vibrant life. And this all comes back to the amount of sugar that we're consuming. Because we're consuming sugar doesn't have the antioxidants to neutralize the free radicals. The free radicals start to create a little bit of inflammation on healthy tissue. Cortisol wants to heal that inflammation, starts to rise high in the system. When it's high in the system, it disrupts the health of the good bacteria. The good bacteria break down, things pass across the gut wall. We begin to see leaky gut syndrome beginning to form. And this then causes this deep down systemic inflammation and can lead to all these other conditions like autoimmune conditions, Sjogren's syndrome, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, for example, high blood pressure, high cholesterol in the system, type 2 diabetes, big hormone imbalances, big menopausal problems. And then, as I say, at worst, at best, IBS and some bloating and maybe some poor sleep. At worst, an autoimmune condition that's completely debilitating. And it all comes back to the amount of sugar that we're consuming. So the consequences then, just on the lighter side, brain fog, low mood, the afternoon slump, lack of productivity, less energy, poor sleep. But on the bigger side, autoimmune conditions, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, joint pain, IBS, chronic IBS in some cases that can lead to IBD, the irritable bowel diseases. So lots and lots of impact from consuming more sugar than we realize in our diet on a day-to-day basis, more about these blood sugar imbalances than anything else, and getting those blood sugar balances under control. Now, I do want to touch here on hidden sugars, because this is a really important area that we need to focus on. Here's some really good examples. You can see the amount of sugar that is in tomato ketchup that we may not even have thought about. Energy drinks and full fat Coke, for example, full of sugar. But even the diet Cokes, we think, oh, well, I'll take a diet Coke because it's got the caffeine in it, will lift me up, but it won't put the calories into my system. But sweetness is sweetness in the body. When that sweet taste hits our tongue, our pancreas still releases the insulin, because the message is sent to the pancreas, sweetness is coming, we need to get ready, release insulin into the system. And so you still start to have these big blood sugar imbalances, still big insulin swings in the system, still cravings, still dropping down to where our energy levels are not where they should be, at this afternoon slump, lack of productivity. So be mindful of diet drinks. There is no such thing as a free lunch, and diet drinks are certainly not a free lunch when it comes to managing your blood sugars. And also things like cereal bars that I mentioned at the beginning, you know, the labels on things like skinny bars, for example. I did a little research around skinny bars the other day, and it's 99 calories and low fat and all these kind of messages that are being thrown at you. But when you scratch beneath the surface, there's tons of sugar in there and tons of sweetness in there. Now, one of the reasons why the diet industry has focused on calories and can get away with this is because there's, per gram of sugar, there is only 4 calories. Per gram of fat, there is 9 calories. And so if they can hide sugars into low-fat foods, they can make it lower calorie. And because we've had an obsession around calories over so many years, the diet industry, or the food industry in particular, know that calories are the thing that's going to sell their product. And they can take out a food group like fat, but when you remove a food group, you've got to add another one in there, otherwise there's no taste. And so they add sugar because it's per gram lower in calories. And so they can keep the calorie content as low as possible. whilst still adding all this sugar. But all that's going to do is spike blood sugars and crash blood sugars and spike blood sugars. So you end up eating more, even though they're only 99 calories, you end up having 3 of them because you're so hungry throughout the course of the day. Whereas if you hadn't had them and your blood sugars had stayed balanced, you wouldn't have consumed all of those skinny bars or whatever they were. And then yogurts are another great example. You know, if you look at the yogurt aisle in the supermarket, it's full of low fat and, you know, only 99 calories, etc., etc. But buried in there is, particularly watery low fat yogurt is anyway, because it's had the fat removed, but buried in there is all this sugar that is just going to cause a spike in your blood sugars and is going to make your ability to be able to manage your weight more effectively less effective, basically. So fizzy drinks, low fat yogurts, sauces, processed foods, all of these things have so much hidden sugar in them, which makes us addicted to sugar on a daily basis. And we don't even realize sometimes that we are addicted to sugar. So really getting to grips with the foods that you're eating and identifying if something is causing you to have blood sugar swings. What you should be looking for as far as the label is concerned on something is anything more than 6 grams of sugar per 100 grams will be added sugar. Now, one of the things that they do, you have to be really careful, is they might do a 30-gram serving. So they can make it look like there's less than 6 grams of sugar in there, but it's only for a 30-gram serving. So let's say it was 5 grams of sugar for a 30-gram serving. Actually, if you make that into 100 grams, you're looking about 16 grams of sugar per 100 grams, which is really high and is going to cause big blood sugar swings. So your full fat, no sugar yogurts are a much better approach to take in terms of balancing your blood sugars than the low fat, high sugar, yogurts that are out there on the marketplace. Bear with me just one second. So what is the panacea when it comes to managing our well-being, when it comes to managing our blood sugar balance, when it comes to getting our insulin under control? Where you want to be is this blue line in the middle here. Between the 2 green dotted lines, that's the ideal for having your blood sugars really well balanced, for having your brain functioning efficiently, for having lots of productivity, for being able to manage your weight effectively, for keeping cortisol levels down, and to be able to manage your insulin balance, your blood sugar balance on a daily basis, to be making better choices, basically. And this blood sugar balance comes from eating the right thing the beginning of the day, or the first thing that you eat. I shouldn't say at the beginning of the day, because not everybody wants to eat first thing in the morning, but the first thing you eat has to be more protein based than carbohydrate based. So you take me back to my toast and peanut butter that I was having for breakfast. I believe that was healthy. Actually, what that was doing, was spiking my blood sugars really quickly. Because first thing in the morning, your stomach is full of hydrochloric acid, and hydrochloric acid is designed to break down protein. It is not designed to break down carbohydrate. Carbohydrate digestion starts in the mouth. Protein digestion starts in the stomach. Carbohydrate digestion then proceeds on when it moves into the small intestine. But if we are eating a carbohydrate-based breakfast, there's no protein in there. As soon as that carbohydrate hits the hydrochloric acid, it's broken down really quickly, released through the stomach lining into the bloodstream very quickly, and we have this big spike in blood sugars. So if we can eat a more protein-based breakfast, which is what the hydrochloric acid is designed to break down, we can actually start to get on this blue line. It's the first step to beginning to regain control over your blood sugar swings, these big peaks and troughs of blood sugar swings. Beginning to eat the right thing, protein-based breakfasts, they will help to keep your blood sugars balanced. You should be able to go from your breakfast to your lunch without needing to snack. If you're snacking, you're on the red line and your blood sugars are really imbalanced. If your blood sugars are balanced, you should be able to go from breakfast to lunch. It takes about, depending on the individual, between 5 and 10 days to get your blood sugars back under control and then start to make progress. And this is one of the reasons when we start on any kind of health regime, often we give up by Wednesday or Thursday because it becomes too hard. It feels too difficult. Because when we first move away from consuming sugar as our main carbohydrate source, the body has to recognize that actually you've got to switch over and start using the glucose from our greens and reds and yellow sources, the vegetables and the fruit sources. And then the body can start to become a lot more metabolically flexible as well. It can start to communicate with the liver, and the liver will reconvert some of those triglycerides that have already been stored. It will convert it back into sugars for energy production. And that is when we can start to see better and easier weight management as well. But alongside that, we can also see cortisol levels coming down. Our gut wall begins to heal more effectively because the gut bacteria becomes stronger because cortisol is lower. We can reduce inflammation in the system, which makes dealing with stress externally a lot easier as well. The body feels nourished. We can be making the right choices. And actually, it's liberating. We don't have to count calories anymore. We just focus on nourishing our body. And it frees us from the kind of shackles of years of being told that what we need to do is count calories in order to manage our weight, or in order to manage any element of our health, to not overeat. You can't overeat if your blood sugars are balanced. One of the reasons why we have an obesity epidemic in the Western world is because so much sugar is hidden in the foods that we're eating. We don't even realize we're on these blood sugar roller coasters. And as a result, we either gain weight gradually or we put on a lot of weight and can't lose it because our hormones are so totally imbalanced. We don't become fat burning. We actually just rely on glucose all the time for energy production. So when your blood sugars are really well balanced, you have greater mental clarity, improved mood, you avoid that afternoon slump, you're much more productive, you sleep better, you've got more energy, the inflammation reduces in your system, so the joint pain goes, the bloating goes, your autoimmune condition might start to begin to come under control, and you can begin to heal the body, and you can make so much progress in this time when your blood sugars are really well balanced. It's really simple to do. It's about making the right choices at the first meal you eat needs to be the right source of food for the body, and then subsequent meals need to then follow suit and feed the body with loads and loads of colors and lots of good quality protein. Now, if you want to go further with understanding how your blood sugars are imbalanced and how you can manage your weight more effectively, how you can manage your menopause symptoms more effectively, how you can sleep better every night, how you can get autoimmune conditions, begin to get them under control, feel more confident in your clothes, be more productive every day, join me for my next 7-day sugar-free challenge. Now, it was originally advertised as starting on the 19th of September, but out of respect to the Queen, I have reallocated it to September the 26th. So we have 2 weeks today. We will start that 7-day sugar-free challenge. As part of that sugar-free challenge, you get a recipe collection and an eating plan. You get a meal planning document. You get live feeds every morning with a little mini challenge every day to keep you supported and keep you accountable and keep you focused. You have to check in at the end of the day to make sure you've done it. It helps to keep you focused. There's little workshops within that, within the week as well. So there's loads and loads of content within the week, and you will learn so much. You'll come away from that week with so much greater knowledge. I've got clients who go through that 7-day sugar-free challenge, and 16 weeks, 20 weeks later are still sugar-free and still going strong. It is a great way to start with in terms of really beginning to get your blood sugars under control. It's just £10 to join that 7-day sugar-free challenge, and it's a great week of interaction and support and accountability to keep you motivated. If you are interested in joining that 7-day sugar-free challenge, I'm just going to put the link to it in the chat now. We start on the 26th. It's run through a Facebook group. It's an really easy program to follow. And if the thought of giving up sugar frightens you, this is a great place to start. And actually what I'm going to do is, because I was going to start it on the 19th of September, I'm still going to open the group on the 19th. I'm still going to open it on this Friday, and I'm going to have a little mini week kind of keeping you, beginning to get you more accountable and staying focused before we go into the main 7-day sugar-free challenge. So if you feel that you need to get your blood sugars under control, if you know that there's some health issues you've been battling and you want to get them under control, start with the 7-day sugar-free challenge. It's a very easy way to take that first step in the right direction. There's no pressure, there's no complicated meals to create. Like I said at the beginning, I have a really busy business. I've got 3 children. Things need to be easy. And actually removing sugar is the first place to start and getting your blood sugars balanced. And then everything flows on from there. So do join me on that 7-day sugar-free challenge starting on September the 26th. If you did want any more information, please do either from a Facebook group, Sue Thomas, no, Sugar-Free and Fabulous with Sue Thomas Wellbeing, or you can just follow me on Instagram, Sue Thomas the Sugar-Free Coach, or like my Facebook page, again, Sue Thomas the Sugar-Free Coach. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining me this evening. I do appreciate you giving up your evening. I hope you found that useful. If you do have any questions, I will be sending the recording link out to everybody. So you can just hit the return button on the Eventbrite notification that you will get, and ask me any questions privately that way, and I will make sure I do answer them. Unless you've got any questions, you want to put them in the chat box now. But otherwise, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me this evening. I do appreciate your time, and I will look forward to seeing some of you hopefully on the next 7-day sugar-free challenge. So take care of yourself, have a great rest of the evening, and I will speak to you very soon. As I said, if you've got any questions, do put them in just hit return on the Eventbrite link, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Hopefully I'll see some of you on the sugar-free challenge. Take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.